Saxon was born Arthur Henning in the newly formed German Empire, a geographic Plato experiment that combined the Northern German Confederation with all of those insular empires that sound like baked goods with suspicious fruity fillings. Prussia worked like the powdered sugar in this situation, smothering the less assertively savory constituents under the heavy hand of Otto von Bismarck. But I'm still not your AP Euro teacher. Side note, Bismarck had one of those wide-hip trapezoid torsos that probably would have set him up to be a great low-bar squatter. To the best of my knowledge, the only time old Otto ever squatted was to take a smoking shit on Denmark, France, and the dissolved Habsburg monarchy. What a waste of potential. Fortunately, Saxon would prove another story. Born in the village of Leipzig, located in the recently reincorporated Kingdom of Saxony, his early years were poorly documented, but we can speculate that mandatory German education laws had him literate and competent in mathing the poundages of mixed plates. Like any good martial arts anime, the confirmable part of Arthur's story starts with his discovery by an overbearing sensei. The Greco-Roman wrestler Arno Paczki, who performed as Arno Saxon, recruited Arthur Henning and Oscar Hilgenfeldt for the, quote, greatest strong show in the 208,000 square mile empire. The 19-year-old Arthur dragged along his brothers Kurt and Hermann, the three making their circus debut as the Saxon Trio in 1897. Arthur's siblings ended up as breathing props. For their closing act, Kurt and Hermann balanced on the collars of a barbell that young Artie somehow lifted one-handedly. That should make you pencil necks think twice before whining about shoulder impingement. Saxon probably thought a rotator cuff was a device used to cook bratwurst on a rotisserie. Before the curtains closed, Saxon liked to invite any fragilely masculine skeptics to try his lifts for themselves. At an 1898 performance, Saxon claimed that not even Eugene Sandow could match his bent press. In a twist straight out of the WWE writer's room, Sandow himself was in attendance, but spoiled the pageantry of the moment by failing to charge down from the stands to the accompaniment of the ragtime equivalent of walkout music. Instead, the established strongman challenged Saxon to a liftoff at the Sheffield Theatre. Sandow set out the opening lifts, charging his spirit bomb for the bent press. In spite of coming into the final event fresh, Sandow fell short of Saxon's mark. Saxon capitalized on his rival's reputation by billing himself as the man who beat Sandow. Old Sandy took that about as well as an anal retentive with hemorrhoids takes a surprise pegging. He saw Saxon's tagline as a threat to his growing brand, and sued the entire Saxon trio for being thermometer-breaking cheaters. More on that in a moment. The proceedings were officiated by a judge with about as much lifting-specific knowledge as the IPF official who red-lighted Jesus Olivares' final deadlift at Sheffield 2023. I've got a feeling that Sandow's restless spirit was pushing against the back of Olivares' clearly locked out knees. Sandow accused Saxon of using a barbell filled with mercury, a steampunk premise befitting a novel by Sherry Priest. The prosecution argued that Sandow had completed the lift successfully. Keep in mind that Sandow sat out the first two events, and that he failed to lock out the bent press. But fame speaks louder than form, and so did the celebrity witness. Saxon's spurned mentor Arno backed up Sandow's claims. In a microcosm of contemporary regional politics, the judge ruled in favor of the Prussian-born Sandow, determining that Sandow had, quote, handled the bell in exactly the same bodily attitude as Arthur. I find it hard to imagine that Eugene Sandow's bodily attitude could resemble anyone except a divorced mother of four re-entering the dating market. The law and general public sided with the established strongman, though the stunt lost Sandow considerable face among physical culturists. Arthur Saxon's reputation only continued to grow, buttressed by a penchant for setting unofficial and uncontested world records in lifts of his own invention. Saxon paved the way for Eric Bugenhagen's conjugate feats in the rat's nest. Saxon was to the bent press what Boogs is to Zurcher's. Many of Saxon's records still stand, partially because no one ever got around to describing how to perform movements like the Arthur lift. Other performances are more quantifiably impressive. A 386-pound pullover and push lift, a 200-pound one-handed snatch, which you should compare to the event weights for the circus dumbbell in modern strongman, a 252-pound military press, a 311-pound behind-the-neck jerk, a 342-pound clean and jerk, and a 247.5-pound one-handed clean and jerk. Keep in mind that Saxon stood at 5'10" and weighed in between 200 and 210 pounds at a body fat that not even Greg Doucette would dispute was sub 10%. These are the kind of numbers that would drive Donnie Schenkel to recite Bible verses and CrossFitters to cope by faking rhabdo. Saxon still holds the official record of 448 pounds in the two hands anyhow lift, a 20th century strongman equivalent of interpretive dance. Saxon's body of work, and also probably his diapered body, would earn him the moniker Iron Hero. For reasons that probably related to that diaper, Saxon was exempt from service in the First World War, but he wasn't immune from its consequences. He would live through the dissolution of the German Empire after the Allies mopped the floor with the Kaisers and barons and took their ball back home with them. The US probably also took the mop home and resold it to some valor-stealing army surplus goer. Saxon fled to Scandinavia, where declining health and malnutrition drove him to revisit his Hashira roots and take work as a stonemason. Saxon had spent his performing days as veiny and striated as Vince Gironda, but in the final years of his life, illness and food scarcity withered him to a body double for Edgar Allan Poe. No official documentation indicates whether or not the downsizing helped Saxon's poetry. He developed tuberculosis, then a fatal bout of pneumonia, which wrested his staunch spirit from his reduced corporeal form on his 43rd jaunt around the sun. Saxon left behind two brothers, one mentor turned Judas, and his 1905 manual, The Development of Physical Power. Extant copies are hard to come by, but many of Saxon's contemporaries paraphrase the training philosophy that he outlined in those pages. Saxon did the ripple-toed proud in his dedication to compounds, preempting Tom Platz's advocacy for heavy loads and high reps. In spite of his penchant for performing in diapers, Saxon condemned lifting as a means to aesthetics. Footnote: you know what really gets my goat? I mean the kind of belly ragging that gets caught in my craw, rubs me the wrong way, grinds my gears, inflames my goiters. It's this condemnation of strength hobbyists as ego lifters, as if rolling up your sleeves to knock out 6 sets of Bayesian curls in week 3 of your hypertrophy meso isn't an act of sheer ego itself. We all know Amy over there supersetting cable kickbacks with the booty blaster can't tell the difference between 495 and 315. Your six-pack won't even strike her fancy. The only way to get her attention is a blue checkmark by your name on Instagram. Not that Amy is even relevant when we get down to it. You aesthetics bras are curling for you, just like I'm squatting for me. In the words of 2010 Drake, you do it for yourself, you're the fucking coldest. My point being that, much like 2024 Drake, we're all stroking something. But forgive me for doing a burpee over this soapbox. This isn't the CrossFit Open. Let's conclude with a moment of silence for the forefather of conjugate, a man who invented more ways to shove stuff toward the sun than senior engineers at Pratt & Whitney. Take a barbell, rip your bicep on an axle, load up a log, and for dog's sake, do it on your own 2 feet. Let's take a stand for vertical pressing and honor Arthur Saxon's savage legacy. The next episode of Strength Stories will cover the broad-backed strong woman Minerva, patron goddess of modern muscle mommies. Thanks for watching. If you've got topic requests, I'd love to hear them below. In the words of the immortal Miyamoto Musashi, seek nothing outside yourself, except a like, a subscribe, and a comment.